What is up, everybody? Welcome to a live edition of Draft Season, where Meegs and I are not live from a bar. We are not drinking on camera, and we are not celebrating the Jets trading up for a dope-ass offensive lineman. I am your moderator for Draft Season, D.A. Osorio, joined as always by 3/4 of the Four Horsemen, Joe Billick, James Kuntz, and Michael Meegan. Meegs, I'll start with you because you're still sober. How are you feeling, man?
I mean, they took Elijah Moore. That's literally all I care about. Like, the rest of the draft means nothing to me. They took Elijah Moore, and I'm just so excited to watch this offense. I don't think I've ever been excited to watch a Jets offense. Also, shout out to Chargers for taking Asante Samuel. That's a great pick.
There we go, and we'll get to that in a second. Fuego, Jets takes, a.k.a. James Moneyman Kuntz. We took the quarterback version of you at 2, right, in Zach Wilson. We traded for an offensive lineman. We take a wide receiver. How are you feeling going into, what could be an uneventful remainder of round 3, or it could be eventful depending on how you look at it? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm really happy for Meegs. I know it was a hard-earned pick with all the arguments that we've had in the Slack. But dude, I'm happy for you.
I don't have any words anymore.
It's been I think one of the things that we talked about, and Joe, I'll get to you right now, but one of the things we talked about was you can live with like a wrong pick. You can live with that if the process is sound, right? Like if you mess up on a pick but you were trying to improve the offensive line, or if you mess up on a pick but like you took a high upside wide receiver, right? And I think the Jets, Joe Douglas's process in this draft in particular so far has been really, really good. Joe, I'll go to you. I know you loved AVT, and honestly, I've went back and listened to every episode in preparation for last night because I wanted to pull little tidbits. And on the second episode of Draft Season, you said your exact words were, "Watch out for Elijah Vera Tucker going top 20." And Joe Douglas being the man to make that happen. So how do you feel vindicated at big AVT going in the top 20?
I do feel vindicated. I love Elijah Vera Tucker. He's been, since episode 2, I've been hot on his trail. He was like projected to be like a round 2 pick at some point, very early in the draft process. And I actually watched a little bit of him, and I was like, no, I'm sorry. This guy is an absolute beast. Because the way he uses his hands and his technique is NFL pro ready. And I'm stoked, man. I mean, this guy, I know it's a little cliche, but to say this, but it's just the truth. He is a plug-and-play player at the left guard spot. The Jets got an absolute stud. The left side of that line is looking ridiculous. Trevor Sikkema of the Draft Network tweeted this thing about how, let me go live to Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker, and he just had a picture of 2 bulldozers. I mean, I was just like, I just fell asleep to that thinking this is just an amazing night because I'm a huge fan of that guy. Absolutely, DA.
Yeah, and I think we can say with certainty that Joe Douglas is not Mike Maccagnan. I think we can put it into that because in 1 year, essentially, 1 calendar year, so from last draft to this draft, he has drafted Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker. That is more than Mike Maccagnan has done to the offensive line. That Mike Maccagnan did to the offensive line in the 5 years he was here. Joe Douglas has done more in that 1 year, right? Signed Connor McGovern too, right? And I think we fully expect McGovern to be better, right, this year. I'm going to jump to the first question that we got in the chat, and then because I think it's a perfect segue. We're talking Jamison Crowder compensation. Now, I said before we jumped on that it would not surprise me if we get a Crowder trade as we're talking, right? We're going to be on until about 9. Meegs, I'll start with you. Jamison Crowder for a 3rd rounder. What are you thinking? If that's the move, are you running to Cleveland yourself and saying yes? Is that what you're doing?
I mean, I'm gonna like order a private jet and fly there. If they can get Jamison Crowder for a 3rd round pick, that'd be a steal for the. I don't think they can pull it off. I think it'll be a day 3 pick. I'm curious if there's a veteran corner out there who's got 1 year left and they do it for a veteran trade, or maybe a linebacker at a position or another position of need, instead of trying to just rely on a day 3 rookie to try to fill some of those holes if they want to get creative. But yeah, I don't think Jamison Crowder is long for this roster. I don't know if Braxton Berrios is long for this roster, and I know he's a hot topic among Jets Twitter as well.
Well, and I for one was very much looking forward to Braxton Berrios and Zach Wilson getting out on the town, really burning Hoboken to the ground, right?
I mean, Braxton Berrios, yeah, he's dating Sophia Copo, so all credit to him.
Right, exactly. And Zach Wilson has very clearly shown that he can pull 2 chicks at once. So hats off to him as well. James, I want to go to you, man. Elijah Moore. What do you? How hyped are you for Elijah Moore being the pick at 34?
I'm a lot more excited than I thought I'd be. I mean, I know so like for those who don't know, we have a lot of discussions about Elijah Moore for some reason in the TOJ Slack channel. And even though I like Elijah a lot, it always seems like I'm the one who's on the more critical side of that discussion. But when we took him, I was just really excited because I feel like it's as close to a near certainty that he's going to be a very productive player as it is for any other player in this draft, just because of how well he performed against the highest level of competition in college football. And he did it without actually wearing receiver gloves. Like, this dude's such a stud in so many different ways. Like, yeah, so I'm pretty psyched right now for some reason.
Sense of Wayne Corbett right there with no gloves on, huh?
I think you have to be an animal. I think you have to be an animal to play wide receiver with no gloves. Somebody has Gaten Casimir asked roster ramifications from drafting Elijah Moore. I think we can all agree it obviously probably means not probably. I think it definitely means Jamison Crowder will not be on this team past tomorrow. I just don't see that happening, right?
Realistically speaking, what do you guys think we could actually get for him? You think? I think a 5th rounder is pretty much. I feel like the highest.
Yeah, maybe a 4, but like probably a higher end 4.
I do think had you tried to
like
trade
130 maybe, like 135, probably best case scenario.
But honestly, that's not even that bad, right? Because you already have 2 4s. You get a third 4, right? And then that allows you to, if you wanted to, you could package 2 of those and go back into round 3. And if you wanted to get, somebody, I think what really helped the Jets in the first round, right? I think what really helped them is you had the 3 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, right? And we'll get to Trey Lance going 3 because you guys don't know this, but we have a full draft season Slack, right? And I was very, very worried that Kyle Shanahan was going off the deep end by taking Mac Jones. So I'm very, very excited. I'm very, very excited to see him take Trey Lance. But I think what you saw help the Jets is that you see after Zach Wilson, Trey Lance goes, right? So Trey Lance goes. Then the Falcons took Kyle Pitts, which, again, kind of ridiculous, right? Like, they probably should have taken a quarterback because they're not going to pick top 5 again. So you have these guys that are starting to push guys down, man. You have guys that are starting to push a lot of talent down. So when Tucker got to 14, Douglas go up and go get him. I think what you want to make sure you continue to do is, right, how are we making sure that Zach Wilson is as successful as possible, right? And you give him an O lineman right next to Mekhi Becton with trading Crowder, right? With trading Crowder and the team, and Slippery Pete just mentioned this in the chat, and I've been mentioning Baltimore for a while, right? However, they took Rashad Bateman, right? But if there was a team that could potentially use a Jamison Crowder as a slot weapon, right? Like I think Baltimore could be that team. I think Green Bay could also be that team, right? Like, so you have that as well. Joe, I'm going to ask you a question because when we had Benjamin Solak on, you coined the phrase somebody is getting pregnant tonight with certain picks. I want to know, with AVT and Elijah Moore, is somebody getting pregnant tonight?
Listen, on a scale from 1 to 5 eggplants, those are 2 bona fide 5s. Like, somebody's definitely getting pregnant tonight. And I wouldn't be surprised if the child was perhaps named Zachy Poo or Zachy Pono. What's his Twitter?
Zach Capono, baby. He's a Polynesian warrior, Joe. You need to
Polynesian warrior. Yeah, God bless him. You were talking about the formula, and what I love to see right now is that Joe Douglas is most definitely adhering to a certain formula, and it's a certain formula that the New York Jets are very familiar with exactly what they did with Mark Sanchez back in the day. They're building the offensive line. Now they have to establish a dominant run game, bring in a dominant defense. Saleh and the 49ers did the same thing a couple of years ago. Dominant rushing game, dominant defense. Joe Douglas won a Super Bowl with that exact same formula. Number 1 offensive line in the league, 3rd-ranked rushing attack, and I think it was the 5th-ranked they had the 5th-ranked defensive DVOA that year, Philly, when they won the Super Bowl. So that is a formula that every single person in this organization is familiar with. That's exactly what they're going to be doing with Zach Wilson. And I'm pretty pumped, man. And like, when you see what they're doing with that offensive line, it's pretty great. And I think that there's still some work to be done, especially since we don't really know what's going to happen with Connor McGovern. We don't really know what's going to happen with George Fant. In 2022, they are going to be in a contract year. And depending on how they play this year, there could be 2 more holes in that offensive line, realistically speaking. So I hope that they do address it again, maybe in the 4th round, grab like a Kendrick Green or maybe a Hainsey. That Notre Dame kid would be an awesome pick, like as far as this wide zone system goes. But with that said, we should be very thrilled with what's going on. Obviously, when it comes to Zach Wilson, he wasn't the quarterback I would choose. People who are talking about draft season are very familiar with it. But I'm going to trust that Joe Douglas knows more about this than I do, and I'm feeling very optimistic that he's in the right situation, right? And we talk a lot about that on draft season. We talk about quarterback fits and landing in the right spot, and that's the main part of quarterback development. And when it comes to Zach Wilson, this is definitely the right spot for him. And for that, I'm definitely feeling a little bit more optimistic than I would have been if it was obviously a different system in place.
Yeah, we're going to know if Zach Wilson is good very quickly. Yeah, it's not. We're not going to have the Tua thing where like, oh, he needs weapons. Oh, he needs this. Like, we're going to know, and hope we just want to see steady improvement through year one and then beyond that, because Joe Douglas is clearly doing everything he can to make that guy's life as easy as possible.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it, Meeks. I think when you look at Zach Wilson, you're walking into a situation where you have a potential franchise left tackle, right? And I know we have questions, and we've talked about this on draft season about Becton getting injured, nicked up a lot, right? But if all things pan out, he's a franchise left tackle. You now take a guy who, and James pointed this out in the Slack, right? How Joe Caparoso, our boss essentially said AVT has Quentin Nelson potential, right? And James made a really good point about how that puts these expectations on players, right? Because if they don't meet them, then it's like, oh shit, like they must suck, right? Whereas AVT could not reach Quentin Nelson potential and still be very good, right? Like he could still be a very good guard. But I think so. Now you have him. You have Corey Davis, one of the better contested catch receivers in the league, right? You have Denzel Mims, who you worked the board last year to get him, right? Now you have Elijah Moore, right? And now you have the semblance of a wide receiver group that takes the pressure off of your quarterback. All Zach Wilson has to do, right, is see receiver, to throw the ball to receiver. That is all he has to do in this situation. You want to see them. I mean, and again, Joe, you mentioned Kendrick Green, right? Meigs, I know Kendrick Green is one of your favorite guys, right? And again, if you walked out of this draft class with AVT, Kendrick Green on the line, and then next year, all you have to do is fill that one hole at right tackle. That's all you have to do. And when you traded up for AVT, you didn't give up any of your first-round picks, like the Chicago Bears had to do when they went up. And again, folks have said, well, the Bears were going up for a quarterback. Nobody knew they were going up for a quarterback, right? So there's no way that they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna hit them with the premium charge because they're going up for a quarterback. Joe Douglas gave up less to go up the same amount of spots to go at a potential All-Pro player. James, tell me, on the board, there's a lot of talent left, and we traded away our 2-3, so you don't have to worry about Kenny Gainwell going 86. I know that was a nightmare scenario for you, right? That was a nightmare scenario for you. But on the board and just looking at how it's shaked out, who's a guy that you would love to see them take with one of their two fourth-round picks? Because, again, they have two of them. They have 2 4s, and they have 2 5s, right, if I'm not mistaken, and then a 6. They don't have a 7. So, again, you still have some picks to add some guys. But who's a guy that you think could slip to the 4th round that you'd love to see them take?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, you either want to draft running back. Wow, that was a Freudian.
Freudian.
I definitely did not mean that. At this point,
UDFA is only for James. That's the way.
You definitely want to draft either a corner or an edge. I think, honestly, it should be between, like, who's the better player. The person I'd want to target is Paulson Adebo from Stanford. I don't know if he's going to be there in the 4th round. If he's not there, somebody I'd be interested in is Quincy Rochet from Miami. I'm a big fan of him. I think he has a lot of pass rush versatility, really good hand usage, relatively athletic, I think like adequate athleticism and pretty good production, and somebody who could make an impact immediately. I would also consider trading one of our picks for a player in the NFL or trying to convert some of the picks this year to 2022 picks, if that's possible.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think could work really well in that scenario, right, is, for example, Marshawn Lattimore got arrested. If the Saints wanted to come off him for cheap, that wouldn't be such a bad idea, right? That would not be such a bad idea. Joe, I want to ask you, because you know way more about O-line than any of us have forgotten. You mentioned Kendrick Green. Give me an O-lineman in round 4 that if the Jets drafted him, you would feel really like, again, we got AVT on the left side, but there's still some concerns about the other right guard position, right? And Fant, you mentioned in the contract here. Give me a guy that you could see in round 4 that just is going to represent really, really good value and fits this scheme. Because I think one of the things we've talked about often is when we get into the later rounds, right, you're looking much more for scheme fits, right? You don't want to get guys that you have to rely on coaching them up so much. You want guys that kind of fit seamlessly into your scheme, so that way the transition is easier. Give me an offensive lineman that Jet fans should pay attention to in round 4 if the Jets don't come back up to round 3.
I think Robert Hainsey from Notre Dame, I mentioned him before. I think that he would be an outstanding fit in this wide zone scheme. He uses his hands really well, just the way he like strikes you. He has really good placement. He could really jar defensive linemen back, and he's got that lateral movement to really work in this scheme. So I would love to see him on the team. I don't know if he's like a day one starter, but he's definitely somebody who you could work into the system. And like you said, maybe by next year, he could take over one of those guard spots. He could definitely come in right now and compete for that right guard spot right away with somebody like Dan Feeney, who, believe it or not, if they don't get somebody else, I do expect that he could end up being the starter there, because I did a report on him when I was at the scouting academy, and I wrote that he is actually perfect for the wide zone scheme. And when I look at Dan Feeney, I look at some of the other guys that Joe Douglas has brought in here, like Alex Smith or even Pat Elflein, they've out kind of produced what people projected them to. So he kind of has a real knack for bringing in these guys who do more than expected. And so bringing in Dan Feeney, who's actually just an amazing, really good fit, if he's going to excel in any system and on any team, it would be for the New York Jets. So I'd love to see that guy, the Robert Hainsey, coming in and competing with him. I think that would be a really nice battle. And then we don't know what's going to happen with Cam Clark, right? Cam Clark could still be a viable option. We'll see if he ends up developing, because it's not easy making the transition from a smaller school to the NFL. He's working with Duke Manyweather as well. So I am curious to see where he's at right now after a whole year of training and just doing what he needs to do to prepare for the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I'm going to go to Glenn Tucker's question. Glenn, thank you for joining us, man, and thank you for chiming in. The question is, could Jamison Crowder and a 6 get the Jets back into the third? And honestly, I think maybe Jamison Crowder in a 5th, because you have 2 5ths, right? So you can give up 1. James, the talk around Jamison Crowder has been some of the most interesting talk on Jets Twitter this year, right? Some people believe that he is the best slot weapon ever created. Some people believe that he should really be a number 1 receiver on the Jets offense. All targets should go through him. I think Sam Darnold believed that too, right? But could you use Jamison Crowder in one of these picks to potentially get up in the third? Maybe with a team like Baltimore, right? Although they drafted Rashad Bateman, so maybe they don't have a use for a slot receiver making $11 million. What are your thoughts on using Crowder in one of these picks to go back into the draft and go back into round 3?
It's tough to say, because I think there are I think slot receivers probably one of the easiest positions to find good players at in the NFL. Maybe that and like 3 technique on defense. And so I'm not sure what his value is. Like, obviously he's good. I think best trade scenario is probably Crowder and a 6th for maybe a 4th round pick. The reason I say that is because Crowder on his own is probably worth like a late 3, but taking into account his contract and his age bumps his value down from where it is. So I would say probably a 6th and Crowder for a 4th.
Yeah, and honestly, if that's the best you can do, that's still not bad, because there's absolutely no reason Jamison Crowder should be on your roster past tomorrow. Somebody just mentioned in our chat, somebody said, what about the Lions? The Lions are rolling out Rashad Perryman as their number 1 receiver.
Oh, the Quintus Cephas like disrespect, DA? Come on. That guy is a baller.
No, honestly, Cephas is not like a bad wide receiver.
I know. I'm being serious. He's nice.
I didn't know if you were being serious.
Yeah, go ahead. If you're number 2, I'm not mad at it, but yeah.
Look, guys, any team with Rashad Perryman on their wide receiver depth chart is not going to do well, right? Penei Sewell is going to have to make sure that nobody touches Jared Goff. Him and Taylor Decker are going to be like just absolutely run blocking for like 50 times. You have TJ Hawkinson, but they could be a team, right? Because again, I think you need some weapons for Jared Goff. Meigs, tell me right now, if the Jets traded back into round 3, who's the guy that you would love to see them take? Because James, you made a really good point. All the fringe first rounders are going right now, right? Washington, the Washington racist team name decided to go and get left tackle Samuel Cosme, right? We also saw, to be fair, we saw some guys that we thought would go in round 2, go in round 1, right? Kadarius Toney, Alex Leatherwood, right, was another one. Who's a guy that if the Jets trade up right now that you would go and grab a shot at tequila right now and say, you know what, I'm done with this stream. Like, that's it, I'm good.
I mean, James mentioned him. It's Paulson Adebo. Great athlete, great ball skills, perfect for this scheme. Like with Jets corners, like this team is they basically just looking for no weak links at the back and win games with your pass rush. It's kind of like how a lot of people have been looking at. I think that's how the Bills approach their offensive line. They don't have any studs. They don't have any weak links. I think that's how the Jets are going to approach their secondary. And with Paulson Adebo and Bryce Hall, those guys can't play man, but if you just put them in zone and if it can just be a feast or famine defense that gets you some turnovers, that's defenses. They can just be middle of the pack with the potential this offense has. The Jets are going to be a good team.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to give Robert Saleh a corner, man. Like, you have to give him somebody because you're not going to roll out there Javelin Guidry and Bryce Hall. Guys, we want to welcome to the live stream the co-creator of the Badlands Draft Guide. And, for those of you that know, I love Biggie. So Greg is my Ace Boone Coon, right? Greg is my guy, Greg Armstrong, from the hallowed streets of Syracuse, New York. Greg, how are you doing, my brother? Thank you for joining us on this live stream.
What's up, fellas? I'm glad to be on this glorious Friday night where we got Elijah Moore.
And please understand that we had to vote to let you on the island because of your disrespect for Meigs, one of Meigs' favorite running back prospects, and because for those of you that joined us on Twitter Spaces the other day, you know that Greg's running back takes just shut the whole Twitter thing down. So we're hoping that happen here.
This is what happens when you compliment Ramondre Stevenson once. Like, all of Twitter just shuts down.
Jack
was like, nope.
I mean, apparently, like, I get excited about one prospect that's like a 4th or 5th rounder, and Twitter's just like, no, we're good. Goodbye.
That's enough.
Stevenson is a beast. That was not a bad take by you, Greg, by any means. Honestly,
listen,
that guy, for his size, moves like a gazelle and a bull had a baby. I mean, like, they're doing pretty good.
It's not like I have a ton of good opinions and takes, and then I finally get one that a good amount of people are on board with, and Twitter was just like, get this guy the hell out of here.
Twitter was like, that's enough.
Yeah,
Greg, I want to talk to you straight up because we have a question about Mac Jones, right? Or as I like to call him, Back Jones. We have questions about Back Jones. So the Patriots don't have to trade up to get blood and alcohol consumption Jones. They're able to sit back at 15 and just take him, right? Now, Gayton says that he sees Chad Pennington 2.0. Now, Gayton, I'm going to be honest. I think that's offensive to Chad, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Greg, when you were looking at the quarterbacks, what were your thoughts on Mac Jones? Because I know, you and Connor were like, there's maybe a couple of things you can like about him, but I don't know if there's a lot that you can like about him. What did you think about Mac Jones?
Yeah, he's a fine player, right? And the whole he played with the Alabama players, okay, to an extent that you could hold that against them, but at the same time, it's just you still kind of have to produce with those kind of players because we've seen Alabama quarterbacks for the past however many years have just monster players on their offense and still just do absolutely nothing. So I think actually producing with those players was fine, but when you watch it, it was clear to me it was Lawrence, Lance, Wilson, and Fields. Those four I'm fine with in the top 3 or 4. However you want to spread them out. Lawrence is one, then the other 3, we could have debates about that. And then Jones was a clear tier below. It's funny to me, right? People are like, oh, the Patriots were in love with Mac Jones. It's were they? Because they didn't trade up. He fell to 15, and they took him. I don't know how that means that they're in love with the guy if they did nothing of importance to go get him besides the fact that he fell to him. I mean, New England's offense it's tough, right? It's funny because during the whole pandemic, a guy following Twitter, Justice Mosqueda, he was tweeting out playbooks that I happened to find the 2016 New England offensive playbook. And the stuff that they have in there, for Brady, it's probably nothing. But for just me reading it, it's insanity. It's if you had to give me a college course on the Patriots 2016 offensive playbook, I'd fail. You could give me the entire semester and I'd probably fail. And so with Mac Jones, the Patriots aren't a team that they're not going to really. I don't think they'll scale it down. I think it did a little bit with Cam last year just to kind of see what he was and see where he was at. But also last year, it was an unprecedented year. The training camps were different. There was no preseason. They couldn't get a real gauge on what Cam actually was in game until they got him in game. And Cam's just a different type of player altogether than Mac Jones. With Mac Jones, that offense is super, super complex. And a lot of it is between the ears and doing stuff, pre-snap and identifying coverages and identifying that kind of stuff pre-snap. I don't want to say he can't do it, But when you're at Alabama, on the same token of you have all of these, weapons and all of these great players on offense, it's like you don't have to make those kind of checks when you're throwing to Jalen Waddle and you're throwing to Devontae Smith and you have that offensive line and you have Najee Harris. So you're going to be playing against really, really good teams, and the jump from college and the teams that they were playing to, and I know it's the SEC, but the jump from college to playing NFL guys, and the game is just that much quicker, and you're not going to have Alabama guys against Ole Miss defenders. It's going to be a lot different, and we saw some things today which just baffled me, right? Where they're like, the Jets are going to rue the day where they didn't take Mac Jones, and it's like no, that's simply not the case. Like I tweeted, like the Patriots could have drafted some guy that was dead in 1840, and that guy would have wrote, the Jets are gonna rue the day that they didn't pick whatever that guy, like Benjamin Franklin, and it's like, all right, sick, man, So I know some Patriots fans are excited, but to me, I'm not worried about it until I have to be worried about it, and I don't think I'm ever going to have to be worried about it.
Yeah, I think that's valid. So I will say, I'm going to toss it to you, Joe, and then I'll go to me, so we can talk about Mac Jones. But I think, so for me, you're talking about a quarterback that 9% of his throws were past his first read. 9%. That is an absurdly low number. That is an absurdly low number, right? Now, when you're throwing to Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle, and you don't have to throw past your first read because they're always open, right? But that's not going to be the case when you're throwing to the Kendrick Bournes of the world, right? And so I think there's this anticipation, there's this expectation with Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick, for the last few years, has not been necessarily the best drafter. He just has not, right? And there's this anticipation that, or this expectation that, you know what? He got him, so he must be good, right? He must be good, right? Whereas the best GM in the league is Chris Ballard, right? That's the best GM in the league. And if the Colts draft you, then I'm automatically going to think you're good. Joe, let's hear your take on Mac Jones, because you think, and then Greg, I'll come back to you after I go to Meeks. But Joe, you and we had a good discussion where I thought that Mac Jones was a throwback quarterback. He was not. He was. I do not think that strictly pocket passers, can be successful in the league anymore. I do not think, aside from Brady, because Brady's an anomaly, but I don't think that's a thing anymore, right? You got to be able to move some in the pocket, and Mac Jones doesn't really move as much as I would like. But you said, you know what, with the accuracy, there is chance for him to be successful. Tell me why. Make the Jets worried about Mac Jones. Sell the Jets on that worry.
Please don't.
Important parts about playing quarterback is being accurate and making good decisions. And Mac Jones does that very well. He definitely has, as Greg mentioned, the stuff between the ears. And as far as his ability to move and the mobility, no, it's not quite there. But in the pocket, he does make those incremental movements, a nice little sidestep while keeping his eyes downfield to make the play. And that's actually a very unique trait that not a lot of NFL quarterbacks have. So the fact that he has that in that package, and now he's going to a team like the Patriots that, listen, Bill Belichick is still a very good coach. And we talked earlier about how finding the right place, landing in the right spot is really half the battle when it comes to quarterback development, and that is a really good place for him. Should the Jets fans be afraid? I mean, listen, the Patriots didn't have the best year, compared to what we've been used to, but they're still the Patriots. And as far as I go, I think that they're still one of the juggernauts in this division, and the Jets should be afraid. I mean, for sure. I mean, they're still the Patriots. Belichick is there. If he could groom this kid, watch out. We're going to have some battles out there for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I will say before I go to you, Meeks, and then I'll come back to Greg. I think Mac Jones there is probably the least I've ever worried about the Patriots at quarterback, and
that's why you should be more afraid though, DA. Because
right. Yeah, I'm letting my guard down, right? I'm letting my guard.
That's right. That's right.
Meeks, I'll go to you.
I thought Greg made a really good point about how complex the Patriots playbook is and how hard that's going to be to learn. And I would give Mac credit because Sark's offense is no picnic. I think that's basically an NFL offense in college, and that's not easy to learn. But this is like saying if you learned Russian, you can pick up Japanese just like that. And my biggest issue with Mac Jones is everyone always compares him to Brady, to Phil Rivers. They're like, oh, these are guys who succeed without mobility. Those guys have been playing football for 20 years. If Mac Jones
in the early 2000s,
if Mac Jones has 1/10 of Phil Rivers' cerebral ability before his rookie contract ends, that's impressive. Everyone always says, oh, he could be Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was valuable when he was cheap, and then once he got expensive, if his team isn't perfect, he folds. And that's and you really saw with Deshaun Watson this year. Deshaun Watson finally it clicked upstairs for him, and his talent got wasted. And I know he's not a great subject to talk about at the moment, but the first 3 years he survived because he was athletic, because he could move around the pocket, he could make plays out of structure. When you see Mac Jones, when his first reads there, or when he has time in the pocket, he makes some really pretty throws. He's a really, really nice deep ball, which is Cam just couldn't throw last year. But he cannot create in the pocket when there's a free rusher. He can make a miss like Justin Fields does, or Trey Lance does, or Trevor Lawrence does, or even Zach Wilson does. And that's where I just think Mac Jones, if he's does Belichick, they have the defense, they have the weapons to uplift him? No, because I don't think he can uplift them.
Yeah, I agree. Greg,
something that Tom Brady does that they're going to definitely have Mac Jones do is get the ball out quick. So he's not going to worry about that as much as you think. Like, that's what Belichick is going to game plan appropriately for this kid's skill set. So, yeah. I will
say, so to that point, before I go to Greg, I will say, though, that part of the reason why Brady ran from New England is because at some point, like, that Patriots offensive line couldn't keep him upright. Like, they just could not keep him upright. Isaiah Wynn, remember?
Edelman got hurt.
Yes, Greg, we will talk about your never-ending devotion to Julian Edelman, who, according to Brady, wants to go to Tampa, just doesn't want to tell Bill yet. But, like, Isaiah Wynn, first-round pick towards ACL, right? Like, their best the pass blocker up front was their center, right? Like, they just did not have good protection. Marcus Cannon got hurt. They just did not have good protection for Brady. Brady got beat up a lot his last year in New England, right? And so now you go and you add a non-mobile, and I don't think you necessarily have to be Justin Fields, right? Who we'll get to in a second, because he ended up, he might end up saving Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace's jobs, right? But you got to be able to move a little bit, some tricks, right? Like whether it's, trying to evade the rush by a slide step or stepping up into the pocket when guys are coming around you or whatever. And he had a better offensive line at Alabama than he's going to have at New England. So I think for me, I'm not sold on it, right? I'm still worried about Brandon Beane and McDermott and the Bills, right? Like that's the team that I'm still worried. I think I start to kind of care about what the Giants have done. They just drafted Aziz, right? That's like, I'm like, all right, you added another pass rusher to that front, right? I don't think I'm so worried about New England yet. Greg, before I go back to you, James. Justin Fields to Chicago. I'm coming back to you, Greg, I promise. But I want to ask you about Justin Fields, because Justin Fields, I think we were all in agreement. Like, listen, he is quarterback 2, right? He's closer to 2 than he is to 3, but he ends up being quarterback 4 taken, and honestly, just 4 spots ahead of quarterback 5, Mac Jones. What do you think of the fit with him in Chicago? Him with that defense, Allen Robinson, David Montgomery. They drafted Cole Kmet at tight end last year, isn't really good, but they drafted him. And the O-line's decent. What do you think of Justin Fields in Chicago?
I mean, I think it's a pretty bad place to be. They're probably going to have a new head coach and a new GM sometime soon. That's never a situation you want to be as a quarterback, because GMs want quarterbacks that they selected and head coaches want quarterbacks that they okayed. So overall, I think it's a pretty poor landing spot. The protection is not great, and neither are the weapons. Allen Robinson's not even there long term, which is kind of tough. But that's also part of the NFL draft. You can only project the players, not the landing spots. So it is what it is. I mean, I think he'll find reasonable success no matter where he goes.
Yeah, Greg, I'll go back to you now, because I want to hear your thoughts on Justin Fields. But you had one last point you wanted to make on Mac Jones.
Well, yeah, the Mac Jones thing, and I don't want to make it long-winded now, but, with your point, too, with Brady making it a lot easier, I study the Patriots a lot just because they've been so good for so long, and I'm just interested to see how they do what they do. And the Brady comparisons fall really short for me because, Brady was in the same system for however many years, and then B, like, a lot of their routes are option routes, and it's a lot easier to do those things when you have a Julian Edelman and a Danny Amendola, and you have a Chris Hogan, which league-wide are probably not looked at as stars, but for that system are absolutely perfect. And it helps, to have Gronk for whenever he had him healthy, to have a mismatch all over the field. And this current Patriots team, they got Hunter Henry, they got Jonnu Smith. They're really, really fun talents, and they do scare me. But to compare it to the Patriots of old, it falls short for me, right? Like it doesn't make it, even with Cam, even with Mac Jones, Like I'm just not that worried about it until they show me that it's going to be similar or somewhat to the Patriots old. On the opposite token, I think Belichick and McDaniels are kind of salivating at all these new weapons and how to reinvent their offense, which scares me. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, the Mac Jones, it's always the Mac Jones to the Patriots. Like, oh my God, it's Brady 2.0, 20 years, 5 more Super Bowl rings. But and your earlier point, Dalvin, this is what I want to touch on before I was interrupted by 4 different people. But the Belichick drafting thing, like that's something that I've studied a lot of, and I made this point earlier this week to someone. The theory behind what he does is really, really good. I think the execution of it is poor, and I think that's kind of hard to differentiate when it comes to, you know, what you see on the field and then what happens on draft day. Because like I like his process of drafting these types of players, and you know, the book War Room is a really, really good in-depth look at what, you know, the Patriots did to kind of build their dynasty. But the process behind all of what they do and trading back at picks and recouping more and drafting the type of players that they do, it's a good process in theory, but just it doesn't execute on the field. With Justin Fields on that point, it kind of sucks that he goes to Chicago because, you know, I love Justin Fields. And when the real kind of Twitter debates were going on of, is it Zach Wilson or is it Justin Fields? I was cool with either. Like, I was ready to ride with whoever, even Trey Lance, you know, probably just a notch below that. But Fields and Wilson, I could care less. Like, just draft either one of them and I'm cool. You know, going to Chicago, it does scare me, right? Like, because it is Chicago. I think they'll be able to do more in the offense. I think they were very, very limited with Trubisky and with Foles and whoever else the hell they wanted to trot out there. So I do think that will open up a little bit more. It's kind of funny that like, what year is Allen Robinson now? And he's like finally playing with an actual good QB, like going from college to the with Hackenberg in college.
It's year 8 for Allen Robinson.
Yeah, year 8. So he goes from Hackenberg in college, Bortles in the NFL, and then he had Trubisky, and then Foles, and then Trubisky again. Like, you want to talk, and the guy's still putting up numbers. So I think he's going to be a scary guy in that Chicago offense. You know, with Fields, I do like I said, I do think they will be able to do a little bit or a lot more with Fields, just because you look at him compared to Trubisky and you look at him compared to Foles and just the different skill sets and the things that Fields is able to do. It's night and day between those two guys. And this is obviously like the best quarterback that they've had since Cutler, right? Like the NFC Championship game.
It's not even debatable,
right?
Yeah.
Like it's not even close. Yeah,
I mean,
so
the other one's Rex Grossman.
I think it might have been Jim McMahon, if we're being honest.
Jim McMahon,
If we're being real about it.
Jim McMahon succeeded my birth by a good 12 years. Plus,
so having a guy like him, like as a Bears fan, you're very excited, and I think it'll be kind of fun, like to see him with Robinson, to see him. You know, they have David Montgomery. I don't think that the defense is still really, really good. I don't think they're at the level they were when they were at when they lost to the Eagles. It's still really, really good. And also, maybe they play a lot better now that they have a Justin Fields, right? Instead of having a Nick Foles or a Mitch Trubisky out there, where you're almost relying too much on that defense to bail you out. And Justin Fields is going to have his rookie pains, like it happens to everybody. But there's a lot more to him, and I feel a lot more confident in him making plays that Trubisky and Foles can't. And like, we don't know what's going to happen with Rodgers, but if he's out of there, I'll say it. I think the Bears are a favorite in the division. I think they're the favorite.
I will say I think they're the favorite in that division if Rodgers leaves, because I think their defense is that good. And we've talked about. I mean, again, if you've been listening to the draft season, you know that Justin Fields is the guy that we like him and Trevor Lawrence are the guys that we thought we were like, you know what? And James, you had posed this question maybe about a month ago. You said the odds of them turning out to be the absolute best that they can be, and I think we all agreed that Fields had higher odds than Wilson, just because we all thought he was better. We thought he was the better player. There's one question from Glenn Tucker in the chat, and I want to go to all of you. What position is more critical right now to Robert Saleh's defense? Is it outside linebacker / edge, or is it cornerback? James, I'll go to you. Outside linebacker / edge or cornerback? What's more critical for position of need? More critical for Robert Saleh's defense?
Well, I mean, I think it's more important to have good edge rushers, but at the same time, the current edge rushers on the roster are significantly better than the current cornerbacks. So in terms of a draft need, I think it's much more important to take corners right now than it is edge rushers.
Yeah. Joe, what about you? Edge or cornerback? What are you thinking?
I agree with James 100%. They're desperate for corners. Hopefully they get one late here. There are some pretty good ones. Ambry Thomas is an interesting late. So see if they could pick one of the guys up. Interesting to see if they move up into the third. Maybe if Yatu Melifonwu was there, I would be kind of a really nice pick, a nice person to move up for. He's a perfect fit for this defense. He does everything. He could play off man. He could press. I mean, I would be, if there was one player that I'd like for them to move up for, it would probably be him.
Yeah, and I think Glenn just mentioned this in the chat. The Jets right now don't have a weak side linebacker, right? And we had Blake Cashman was on the TOJ pod a couple days ago, and it seemed from part of that conversation, it seems like Blake Cashman's going to play much more outside linebacker than he is going to play inside, right? They signed Gerard Davis also $7 million, which means I don't think they signed him to be Mosley's backup, but to Joe's point earlier, they're going to play nickel more than anything, right? You're going to see 4-2-5s, right? You're going to see 4-2-5 formations. You're going to see 4-1-6s, right? Like you're going to see those kind of formations. And for those watching, Meigs is laughing because the Seattle Seahawks took a 24-year-old wide receiver. And
this is the team that trades 2 firsts for a weak side linebacker takes Dwayne Eskridge over Terrace Marshall. Couldn't be my franchise.
Dwayne Eskridge is badass, though. I'm sorry. That guy, his releases from the line, his hand-foot combinations are like some of the best in the entire draft. Like Terrace Marshall's my wide receiver 5. I hear you, Meeks. But let's not, completely crap on Dwayne.
I would not take Dwayne Eskridge that high. Also, 24-year-old. I don't draft 24-year-olds. Mike McCagnon ruined him for me.
So Terrace Marshall is still on the board. His leg injury must be a lot more significant than where he because
I think he's got multiple. I think it's been a knee and foot, and that's why he's fell. I think Brugler's mock only had him going in the 3rd round this morning, so I don't think it's great, but I don't know. Dwayne Eskridge. Also, Tylen's on the board. Shut up, my guy James Coots.
And also, like realistically, if you wanted a slot receiver, you could have taken Jalen Darden in round 6 if you really wanted to do that. Like with Eskridge, I will say I like Eskridge's game downfield in particular. Like I think he can win downfield, which is very different, right, than most slot guys. But your receivers are now. It's Tyler Lockett, who's your speed guy. DK Metcalf should be your possession guy, but he also wins downfield. You now get Eskridge. That's again more vertical games for Russ. So I think it does help him. But I might have gone Tylan Wallace here. Like if I wanted to add another receiver. Glenn said that he doesn't think Cashman's going to make it to the 53-man roster healthy, and I think that's a legit concern, right? Like when the Jets drafted him out of Minnesota, he had 2 shoulder injuries, right? Like both shoulders were jacked up. He had some back issues too. Cashman's an interesting guy because if the Jets are banking on him, I don't necessarily see that working out. Meigs, you've been talking of Jabari Zuniga though. As again, he had his redshirt year. To tell the Jet fans why you think it's Jabari that's going to be that guy. And
because I think he's a way better fit in this offense. I mean, I didn't think Jabari Zuniga was an actual person for like a good 15 games last year. I was like that guy might be a social experiment, but they spent a top 80 pick on him. Like when he played at Florida, he showed some quickness, he showed some actual juice, and I think he's a better fit for a 4-3. And him and Bryce Hufford is gonna be a situational pass rushers where like Vinny Curry, you just bring him in, you rotate him, and tell him to get after the quarterback. You play Carl Lawson the big money to do everything. Hopefully, Quinn Williams takes that DeForest Buckner leap, and you just want to see a life for them because the Jets draft last year I liked, and I think Mims is good. I think Becton, if he's healthy, is going to be great. And Bryce Hall showed some things, and if they can get 2 starters from Davis, Zuniga, Hall, or even Cam Clark, that's an awesome draft. If you're dropping 4 starter drafts, you're an elite GM.
Yeah,
that
that's
simple.
a fact. That's a fact. You're not part of the John Elway school of thinking where you're only nabbing one starter every 3 years, right? That's not a thing. Greg, I'll ask you this, man, as we begin to start to wrap up. We got about 15 minutes left on the stream, but I want to ask you, how, like, one of the things that I think, and we've had the Sam Darnold conversation, and as we see Matt chime in and say Jabari Zuniga isn't real.
Social experiment.
Social experiment, right? And as we see that the little man Tutu Atwell goes to the Rams, the 149-pound receiver goes to to Matt Stafford, and James says that they drafted a dude who weighs less than him. They drafted a dude that weighs less than you and who has my daughter's nickname as his first name. I think it's hilarious, right? But Greg, we've talked about the Jets' failures to Sam Darnold, and some of it was Sam Darnold. And I think Jet fans don't like to hear that, right? I think Jet fans like to think that it was all the Jets, right? And we've debunked that multiple times. But how good does it feel to see all the work that Joe Douglas has done already to make sure that Zach Wilson is put in the best possible position to succeed?
Oh, it's a relief, man. Like, when you trade up for Sam, I think go back to that. When you trade up those picks to get to Sam, you better make sure damn well that you do everything in your being to put pieces around him for him to be successful. And they just didn't. They just didn't do any of that. And with Wilson taking him at 2, and then identifying that interior O-line was a weak spot on this team, and having the draft capital that they did, and we saw that. I think we saw that a lot last night and early this morning, of people being upset of what they gave up to go get Elijah Vera Tucker. But you get those kind of draft picks to make a move like that if a deal presents itself. Like, interior O-line was a massive need for this Jets team, and Douglas found a trade partner in order to go up and get him, and he fell that far. That's why you get those extra third. That's why you have the extra seconds and the fourth. Like, that's why that happens. Like, you see a lot of teams take these players in the 3rd and 4th rounds that flame out or they don't do anything. Like, everyone loves to have draft picks until it's time to do something with them, right? Like, you see all the time. Oh, we saw in this Jets team, they took 12 players in a draft. None of them are in the NFL anymore. Like, why are you applauding people who make a bunch of picks? To me, like, the trading up to get Vera Tucker showed me all that I needed to know about Joe Douglas, and that he's not going to make the same mistake that the previous regimes have done in protecting and giving their quarterback weapons and tools to be successful. And we even saw it with Saleh, right? Like, we saw him say in the clip that, this team's going to uplift you and it's not going to be the other way around. And while, like, that's going to make the Twitter rounds, it's going to be really, like, fire me up. That actually, like, that means something to this Jets, not only the fan base, but the actual team. Like, it shows me that you know how to build a team correctly. And it's not just, we saw last year, people like to say, well, they didn't give Sam people last year. It's like, well, Douglas knew, right? Like, he had to have known. Like, Gase is not the guy. Right. Douglas gets the job and he steps in and it's like, oh, Adam Gase got me hired. And then he actually starts to do his job and he's like, hey, F this guy. Like, I'm building the team I want to. I know this guy's not the guy to get me where I want to be. And they don't spend a ton of money on people last year or whatever. And then you see this, they take Becton, right? They get Mims. And then this year, Zach Wilson at 2, we all thought. Then they trade up and get Vera Tucker. They get Elijah Moore in the 3rd. That's a billion times more things that they've done for Zach Wilson than they ever did for Sam Darnold in the previous regime. So, I mean, like, and everyone likes to say, oh, we don't know how it's going to work out. It's good on paper. Well, like, yeah, no shit, man. It's April 30th, right? Like, they don't go to training camp until July. Like, yeah, no shit. We know it doesn't work. But the steps and the thing that I was most interested in, especially with Saleh and Douglas, is more so the process, right? Mm-hmm. Because the way that they've gone about things has been really, really impressive so far in free agency. You get a Carl Lawson, right? You get a Corey Davis, another guy who can go up and get contested catches. They sign these guys where, like, at the beginning, you're kind of like, maybe that's cool, but then you get into it and you see that they're building an actual team for their quarterback, and it's so exciting to just see that they have a plan and not, for as good as Quinn Williams is, not taking an interior defensive lineman the year after you get your franchise quarterback, right? Like, it's good to see you get protection and realize that, like, hey, we have this window, let's take advantage of it. It's just a sigh of relief, and we talk about in the TOJ Slack, like, let's just score some points, man. Like, let's just go have fun. They might win 4 games this year, but it'll be fun. It won't be, the first play of the 49ers game where they score a touchdown and you immediately know the next 59-42 of the game means nothing because the game's over. Like, let's just go score some points and have some fun.
There we go. I'm going to read you guys a quote from Joe Douglas. This league is about creating explosive plays and stopping explosive plays. And if there is not a quote that sums up the NFL as to where it is now, right? Like, it's very much that, right? Like, the yards don't necessarily matter so much, right? Like, in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, that's why you see folks who don't use like yards allowed or yards gained to gauge whether an offense or defense are actually successful. What they use is like, all right, how are you doing in the red zone, right? You stopping guys from getting in, from scoring on you. Okay, then that means you're usually pretty good. Joe, I want to go to you again. We talked Sewell, Slater, we talked Creed Humphrey, we talked a lot of O-line during draft season leading up to the draft. Vera Tucker comes in, slots right into left guard, I think is what we saw. He's going to slide right into left guard. We've talked about the ability for him to kick outside, maybe to right tackle, right? Once you send Fant to the gulag, right, and just send them swimming. Yeah, right, exactly. But I think for me, I'm super pumped to see the running game running behind Becton and Vera Tucker. Speak to that and speak to just the nastiness that Vera Tucker is going to bring with Becton on the left side of the O-line.
Well, it's definitely going to help out the running game, that's for sure. And that's one of the most exciting things about bringing Elijah Vera Tucker in here, especially on that left side. I made a tweet the other day that said, well, they could just run the ball to the left side all game, and that's all they have to do. Obviously, it's I'm just joking around, but that's how excited I am to actually have those two guys there. I will say, though, that they are going to need to probably address running back at some point. This running back backfield is looking pretty grim. I mean, when you look at Tevin Coleman and like who he was, even when he was a running back by committee with the 49ers, he ended up being like the third option there for the 49ers 2 years ago behind Mostert and even Breda. Last year, he was injured. He's an injury-prone player. He's not the kind of guy who I want to be my lead back in RBBC. We can only pray that somebody like Trey Sermon falls to the 4th round, maybe somebody like Khalil Herbert. The one thing I like about Khalil Herbert is that he's actually a little older, and usually you don't like that. But what I like about that is that he could kind of come in and maybe hit the ground running because he has all that experience. And Matt Walden recently compared him to Dalvin Cook, which I think is, I mean, wow, what a comparison. I mean, if you could get somebody who could actually come in and have that kind of skill set. But again, going back to the offensive line, yeah, man, I mean, like, things are looking a lot better, and like you have McGovern, and we talked about McGovern, and we talked about Fant and how, we don't know what they're going to be, but they are a scheme fit. This is a scheme built for their skill set. So they might actually excel. And yeah, Connor McGovern didn't have the best pass blocking last year, but his run blocking actually was fairly decent. And considering there was like 5 guys who've never really played together before, like they actually excelled and did way better than expected in that regard. So coming here now, you got Elijah Vera Tucker, you got Mekhi Becton in his second year, you got Fant. Hopefully he's wildly inconsistent. If he can be a little more consistent, like this could be, if they now address offensive line later and get some guy who by some chance ends up being a day one starter, this could be a top 10 to 15, offensive line potentially. Yeah. Those guys actually, if we get 2019 Connor McGovern, this offensive line is going to be a stud. If we get 2020 version of Connor McGovern, it's not going to be as bright. Let's just put it that way.
I think that's spot on. James, I'm going to go to you as we begin to wrap. We got about 5 minutes left. Your man Tylan Wallace is still on the board, but we're not going to double up on wide receiver. That's not going to be a thing. You saw your classmate Greg Newsome get drafted. You saw your on-campus bodyguard Rashawn Slater get drafted, right? What's the thing that stands out to you the most from, again, just the first 2 rounds, with the Jets? And because I know one of the things that you said, listening to the call, right? Listening to Douglas calling Wilson. Like that was dope. And I agree. Like that got me fired up. I said, okay, well, he was quarterback one all along. That's really what it was. Right? But just what's something you're going to take away from this? Because we talked about the process. We talked about just what Joe Douglas has done. What stands out to you now that we're barreling towards day 3 of the NFL draft tomorrow?
The thing that stands out the most is just that the Jets had a plan of building around the quarterback, and they followed through on it. And they took good players who can make an impact immediately, who have proven track records playing at very high levels of football. So, I mean, I think just having a good plan and following through on that is the thing that stood out most.
Yeah, and I will say Joe Douglas just said that he has all the respect in the world for Jamison Crowder, which you guys know means he'll be traded by Sunday, because that's usually the precursor.
He's a pros pro means
he's a pros pro. Meeks, I'm gonna go to you for the last take of the night. Zach Wilson to Elijah Moore to Denzel Mims to Corey Davis to Chris Herndon. When you're running this scheme, there's a lot of potential here. Does Chris Herndon take the next step with those 3 receivers around him?
I mean, I don't care because he has those 3 weapons around him. But no, I mean, I like for Herndon, you saw what happened with Gesicki. Like once he got away from Gase, you're like, oh wow, this guy can actually play football.
Right.
And Chris Herndon, when he didn't have Gase, when we saw him as a rookie, was talented. Even the last 4 games, I would say this past season, Herndon looked like, oh, he's actually a real person. But I just want to see him used in the red zone. That's really where I think he's going to do a lot of his work. And I just want Mike LaFleur just to run speed crossers every day of the week with Mims, with Moore, with Davis. Yeah. Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore both ran a 6.6 3-cone. We have 2 wide receivers on the team that can do that, and I don't think any other wide receivers there's no team in the NFL that can say that. So I'm just gonna live that life.
Yeah, and
Wilson's gonna have a 7 yards per target type of thing, and the Jets are gonna score 28 points a game.
That's it. And then suddenly we won't be doing mock drafts by Halloween, guys. That's the goal. That is the goal.
I just want to pick 13th. Let's live a little.
13th.
No, listen. If we pick
a little higher than that,
if we pick 13th and the wheels fall off in Seattle, and suddenly we're picking 2 and 13. I think we're in really good shape. Guys, thank you guys so much for everybody who joined on the chat. We hope we got to all of your questions. Meegs, Fuego, Joe, Greg, thank you guys for joining the draft season live pod for the last hour to rock out with us. Let's see what our guys do tomorrow, right? Because the work is not done. If they can walk out with another interior offensive lineman, potentially a running back, right? Because I do think, somebody tweeted out Ty Johnson, running back 1. I'm not mad at it. I said, I'm mad at it. I'm mad at it. I don't think that's what you need to do. And want more for yourself, Jet fans. Joe Douglas has shown you that we can have good things. But thank you guys for rocking with us, and we will be back with another episode of Draft Season for next Wednesday, recapping the draft in a little bit more detail, and we'll have another guest on. Greg, hats off to you for all the work that you did on the Badlands Draft Guide. You see I'm rocking the Badlands shirt. This is a 1 of 1.
Go subscribe
if you haven't already. Also, real quick, to Gaten's point, any hope for Trayvon Wesco? Maybe. Maybe. He might be the H-back. in this offense. Flip a coin.
No Gray, baby. No Gray.
He could be a fullback. You never know. What
he might be. Flip a coin between him and Angels and Demons, Dan Brown. But subscribe to Badlands. If you haven't subscribed. It's the best $3 to $5 that you're going to spend a month, right? You're going to get a bunch of stuff over the offseason. Keep in mind, TOJ Live launches with their first 2 episodes with Jake Osman and Connor Rogers launches in May. Draft season will continue to provide you with draft coverage, not just now, but into the foreseeable future. As you have seen, we have launched the official TOJ Draft Season site. And that is it. Let's go, Jets.
Shout out to Jets and Joloff, our boy Dan.
Yeah.
For making shit happen.
Yeah.
Hardest worker in the freaking world.
And the last thing, tune in tomorrow on SNY because the boss, Joe Caparoso, is going to be on for their Tailgate NFL Draft Special. So make sure you tune in. That is at 5 o'clock tomorrow on SNY. We'll be sure to tweet out the links when they start streaming it and stuff so you guys can watch that. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.
Brand is strong.